Imagine a company so powerful it could wage war, colonize nations, and change the global economy, all while making its shareholders incredibly rich. Meet the VOC, the Dutch East India Company. Founded in the early 1600s, it became the world's first multinational corporation, the first to issue shares, and one of the most influential and controversial organizations in history. But behind the riches and power lies a darker legacy of violence, exploitation, and colonialism. In this video, we'll explore the full story of the VOC, how it rose, how it ruled, and how it eventually crumbled. The VOC was founded in 1602, when the Dutch Republic merged several competing trading companies into one powerful enterprise, the Verenigde Oost-Indische Compagnie, or United East India Company. It was granted an unprecedented charter by the Dutch government, giving it monopoly rights over trade in Asia. But that wasn't all, it also had the authority to wage war, build forts, mint coins, and govern overseas territories. In essence, the VOC was part business, part empire. It was managed by the Heren 17, a board of 17 powerful directors. The company was divided into 6 regional chambers, the largest in Amsterdam, followed by Zeeland, Delft, Rotterdam, Hoorn, and Enkhuizen. To fund its voyages, the VOC became the first company in history to issue public shares, making it the prototype for the modern stock market. So what did the VOC actually trade? Mainly, spices. Pepper, cloves, nutmeg, cinnamon, and mace were worth their weight in gold in 17th century Europe. The VOC's ships sailed from the Netherlands to Southeast Asia, particularly the Spice Islands, now part of Indonesia, India, and Ceylon, modern-day Sri Lanka, and returned with cargo that could make investors extremely wealthy. But the company didn't just trade, it fought for control. The Portuguese and the English were also active in Asia, and the VOC wasn't afraid to use force to gain monopolies. Its most infamous campaign was in 1621, on the Banda Islands, where VOC troops, under Governor-General Jan Pieterszoon Cohen, massacred nearly the entire population to secure exclusive nutmeg rights. This was not an isolated incident, it was part of the VOC's brutal strategy to control the spice trade. To maintain its empire, the VOC established major trading posts and colonies across Asia. Its headquarters in Asia was Batavia, founded in 1619, today known as Jakarta, Indonesia. From Batavia, VOC governors ruled over trade networks stretching from Japan and China to South Africa and India. The company built a network of fortified outposts, including Fort Zeelandia in Taiwan, Fort Kochi in India, and Cape Town in South Africa, originally a VOC refreshment station. The VOC also used local labor, slaves, and military force to maintain control, often interfering in regional politics and economies. In many areas, it acted as a sovereign power, collecting taxes, enforcing laws, and even conducting diplomacy. Life within the VOC was tough. Thousands of sailors, soldiers, and merchants joined the company hoping for wealth, but many died from disease, shipwrecks, or battles. Conditions aboard VOC ships were harsh. A journey to Asia could take 6 to 8 months, and diseases like scurvy were rampant. On land, Dutch settlements were heavily male-dominated. Some VOC officials took local wives, while others imposed strict colonial rule. The VOC also maintained meticulous administration, keeping logbooks, cargo lists, and letters that survive today as key historical records. By the 18th century, the VOC's power began to decline. Corruption and inefficiency plagued the company. Officials prioritized personal gain over performance, and costs rose as profits fell. Meanwhile, competition from the British East India Company grew stronger. As wars raged in Europe and Asia, the VOC's trade routes became riskier and more expensive to maintain. The company took on debt and began losing money. By 1799, after nearly 200 years of operations, the VOC was dissolved by the Dutch government. Its debts and possessions were taken over by the state, laying the foundation for the Dutch colonial empire in Indonesia. The VOC left a powerful legacy. It helped shape the modern world economy, introduced the concept of the public company, and connected Europe with Asia on an unprecedented scale. Cities like Jakarta, Cape Town, and Colombo bear its imprint to this day. But its darker legacy is equally significant. The VOC represents the beginnings of European colonialism in Asia. It built its empire through violence, exploitation, and monopolies that often harmed local populations. Today, the VOC is remembered both as a pioneer of capitalism and a symbol of colonial oppression. Statues and place names tied to the VOC are being re-examined, as we ask, how should we remember this part of history? While the Dutch East India Company, or VOC, was thriving in Asia, the Dutch Republic turned its attention westward. In 1621, the Dutch West India Company, the WIC, was born. Much like the VOC, the WIC was a state-chartered trading company, granted monopoly rights. But its focus wasn't spices or Asia. Instead, it operated across the Atlantic world, West Africa, the Americas, and the Caribbean. Its main objectives: disrupt Spanish and Portuguese colonial power, control transatlantic trade routes, establish profitable colonies. It was granted the right to build forts, sign treaties, wage war, and rule territories. Essentially, it was a private empire in corporate form. From the start, the WIC was more militaristic than the VOC. Its founding strategy, known as the Groot Design, or Grand Design, aimed to capture Portuguese Brazil and West African forts, cutting off the flow of gold, sugar, and enslaved people to Spain and Portugal. One of its most dramatic victories came in 1628, when Dutch Admiral Piet Hein captured a Spanish treasure fleet near Cuba, bringing in over 11 million guilders, a fortune. With that funding, the WIC launched full invasions. It took over northern Brazil in 1630. Captured Luanda and Elmina, important African ports. The WIC wasn't just trading. It was fighting, conquering, and colonizing. The WIC established a vast but scattered empire. In the Americas, its main colonies included Dutch Brazil, 1630 to 1654, New Netherland, including what we now know as New York City, Suriname, Curaçao, and parts of the Antilles. In Africa, it controlled key ports involved in the slave trade, such as Elmina, Ghana, Luanda, Angola. Some colonies were short-lived, like Dutch Brazil, lost to the Portuguese in 1654. Others, like Suriname and Curaçao, remained under Dutch control for centuries. These territories were central to the WIC strategy. They were hubs of trade, plantation economies, and slave distribution points. The WIC's most enduring, and darkest, legacy is its deep involvement in the transatlantic slave trade. It was a key player in the triangle trade. 1. Dutch ships left Europe with weapons, textiles, and alcohol. 2. In West Africa, they traded these for enslaved people. 3. Then they sailed the Middle Passage to the Americas, where enslaved Africans were sold on plantations in exchange for sugar, coffee, and tobacco. The WIC transported tens of thousands of people in horrific conditions. Enslaved labor was the backbone of its profits, especially in Suriname, where plantations were brutal and deadly. Unlike the VOC, which also used forced labor, the WIC was systematically built around slavery as a business model. By the mid-1600s, the WIC was losing power. Military campaigns in Brazil had failed. Corruption was widespread. Profits were shrinking. In 1674, the WIC was declared bankrupt. But that wasn't the end. The Dutch government restructured it into the second WIC, with more limited goals: manage existing colonies, continue the slave trade, defend Dutch interests in the Atlantic. It no longer held monopoly power and gradually lost influence to private traders. Finally, in 1791, the second WIC was dissolved, its territories absorbed by the Dutch state, paving the way for formal colonial rule. So how did the WIC compare to its more famous sibling, the VOC? The VOC operated in Asia, built vast trade networks, and governed territories like Indonesia. It lasted almost 200 years and became the wealthiest company in history. The WIC, by contrast, operated in the Atlantic, focused on warfare, colonization, and slavery, and struggled financially throughout its existence. Yet both companies had extraordinary powers, and used them to enrich shareholders at the expense of local populations. Where the VOC's legacy includes trade and cultural exchange, alongside exploitation, the WIC is remembered mainly for colonial violence and the slave trade. Together, they represent two sides of the Dutch Golden Age, one built on commerce and diplomacy, the other built on conquest and captivity. The Dutch West India Company may be less known than the VOC, but its impact was no less significant. It reshaped lives, economies, and borders, often through violence and exploitation. As we revisit the stories of these early corporations, we must ask, what was the true cost of empire, and who paid the price? Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments below.